Hi, and welcome to How to Network Creatively Without Feeling Stalkery. Today's webinar agenda is going to be covering goals for this webinar. We're going to talk about the networking dilemma, why you should bother with networking, 3 keys to the solution, take a minute to talk about the foreign factor. We'll take a look around LinkedIn, and then some in-person networking tips, and then we'll have a Q&A. So who am I? I am Laura, the environmental career coach. I'm the past president of the Tampa Bay Association of Environmental Professionals. I'm now serving on the National Association of Environmental Professionals board for the Education Committee and the Conference Planning Committee. I'm the founder of this environmental career coach, former lead of the TBAP Women in STEM group and annual workshop, which we just wrapped up our 3rd annual sold out workshop, which is awesome. I have about 13 years of experience in environmental science, and was a former grant manager of over $2 million in environmental project funds and projects. I'm a certified project manager and owner of a consulting business. So our goals for this webinar are to affirm the benefits of networking. I'm really trying to sell you on this and give you some clues as to what you might be doing wrong if you're not feeling like it's working for you, and then increase your chances of successful and meaningful connections. So this networking dilemma, what is it? When networking works out, it's wonderful. It works out great. But when it doesn't, which is more often than it does, it really starts negative mind chatter going in your brain. So that's the dark talk. Why didn't someone get back to me? What did I do wrong? What did I say wrong? And so the second thing there is that the concept of networking is misunderstood. Some people still think that networking is about going out and asking for a job. So they don't understand that networking is about building relationships. So that right there is going to set them off on the wrong foot. And then it often doesn't have the instant gratification that we're used to these days. So what that means is that if I send a message to somebody on LinkedIn and they don't get back to me in a few minutes, then I start to wonder what I said wrong. If they don't get back to me in an hour and 3 hours, if it moves into a day or 2, then I really start thinking, what did I do wrong? And the mind chatter, that dark talk gets worse in your brain. And we don't think about other people are busy. We don't think about, I sent the message on Friday, so maybe they're not going to get back to me next week. But then next week rolls around and they still don't go back to me. So those types of negative mind chatter build upon each other, and it gets worse and worse as it goes on. And the other issue is that strategy is often skipped over. So a mistake that you might be making is getting made over and over again. You might not be contacting the right people, which is going to reduce the number of responses that you get. And so what we want to do is get as many quality responses as possible so that we can reduce that negative mind chatter, so that we can have positive networking experiences. So the stronger your strategy is, the less of those people who are never going to get back to you are on your list, the better you're going to have in your response rate, and that's going to make it a more positive experience for you. And the result of all of that is that it then feels stalkery, dirty, it feels wrong. You don't know if you're doing the right things, it feels intrusive. Are you bothering people with your messaging? It feels confusing because you don't have a plan. Difficult, and basically it ends up just feeling like it's a waste of time because you're not getting any results. So it is a real problem. This stalkery thing does exist. Some of the sources, these are basically the 3 sources that build up to that mind chatter. So stranger danger is a real thing, and online and social media, it's getting more and more prevalent. I know in my LinkedIn, I get a connection request from other people who want to coach consultants probably every other day. So LinkedIn has tools that allow people to sell to other businesses online. So there's a lot of that kind of stalker selling going on. I had a advertising coach that approached me, and I didn't accept her requests, and I saw her stalking me every time she came to visit my page again every couple of weeks. I knew she was there. So, she falls in that stalker category for me, and she may not even realize that that's happening. Now, the thing that I want you to keep in mind is I couldn't tell you what her name is, so it may be a strategy that works for her with other people, but with me, I'm thinking, who is this woman? But I don't know who she is. If I met her in person, I would have nothing against her. I would not have any idea that she was that person. I might figure it out later, but a lot of the stranger danger stuff is what we put in our own head. And then there's some of it that it really is them. So we'll talk about that in a second. But when you're putting a connection request out there to other people, you're stepping into their world, and you don't know what that world is at the time. And they could be a person whose the stranger danger level is high. Maybe they're getting spammed crazy. So when they see another email or message come in that they don't anticipate or recognize, it goes right into that bucket. And then it's you. There's a lot of things that you really could be doing, like I just said with this woman, that you don't even know that you're doing or not doing. So when it's them, the thing to keep in mind is that you want to be empathetic about their situations and consider the fact that maybe they're just too busy. So you've messaged them. Timing is important in most cases. So if you've messaged somebody when they're in the middle of a deadline or a big project, they're not likely to respond, but that's not something that you're going to know. So that adds to the mind chatter and dark seed in your brain. They may not actively use LinkedIn, and I'm going to show you some ways to figure out some clues that you'll be able to see if that kind of person isn't going to reply because they're not an avid LinkedIn user. Lots of people have LinkedIn profiles, but that doesn't mean they actively use it. So you may connect with somebody who jumps onto LinkedIn every 6 months, and they're not likely to gonna reply to your message. They may just have forgot. So lots of people have good intentions, and they say, okay, well, when I'm done with this deadline or when I get time, I'll get back to this person. And then it falls down in the queue and they don't ever get back to it. Then there's the people that aren't going to reply to you. These people, I feel like if you have social media, you're kind of obligated to manage it, but that's not like a law. That's just my feeling. But there are other people who don't have that feeling. So if you send an email or message to somebody who just doesn't reply to people they don't know, then that's a thing that happens, but it has to be in your mind a thing that's just a matter of fact, not something you take personally. So that's on them. That's not on you. And then they may have started to think of you and got distracted. So if you've asked somebody, hey, I saw you have a job available at the place that you work, and I was wondering if you might know somebody that would be willing to talk to me, they might actually have reached out to someone for you and then got lost in that process. So they might have reached out to somebody who didn't get back to them. And then, so you see how they were intending to get back to you, and then they passed it on, and then that person didn't get back to them. And that's something that can happen. And they may not have ever seen your connection note. They might not see your email. It's very likely that it might go in their spam or their trash box or caught by their firewall or filter at work. And it could, I don't know if you notice, but when you message somebody in LinkedIn on the desktop, it looks different than on your phone. And so it's possible, and I think this happens often, that people, especially who don't use LinkedIn often, they don't know how to see that note that actually comes with the connection request, or they don't have time, so they just accept the connection request and never actually read that message that came with it. So the recommendation is that you send a note with your connection request, but a lot of times it's not even seen. And then on your phone, it's a whole different thing too, where if you hit connect without, it doesn't stop and ask you to do a note like it does on the desktop. So that's something to be aware of. So Courtney, you're asking me about people are reaching out on LinkedIn and you don't know why. And you don't know them. So we'll cover that a little bit later. But don't worry, we'll get to it. I did want to notice too, I didn't say, if you hadn't noticed, that the slides, because I have so much material here, this platform doesn't allow me to do like bullets that come up one at a time. So it's a lot of information on one slide. I did provide you in the handouts. You should be able to download the slides so you can look at them later, write notes on them. So I did want to let you know that. Okay, so when it's you, this is when you're the one that's creating the stalkery feeling. If you haven't researched and planned ahead, they will notice. So just like Courtney just asked me, she's getting these connection requests and don't know why. It's obvious to the person on the other end. You might be thinking that you're pulling a fast one, or if I'm sloppy about it or quick about it, no one's going to notice, but people notice. It's very obvious the difference between a well put together message and one that's not. And always think about, if you were the person on the receiving end, what would you think of the message you just sent? The second thing that happens all the time, you don't even introduce yourself. If you're talking to a stranger, it is number one cordial thing to do is to say, hi, my name is, and why I'm messaging you. So if you skip that part, you're immediately just telling the person, I'm not here for you. I just have this thing I want to shove on you right now. And they will notice that. And if you are sending stuff that's focused solely on you and what it is that you want, they're going to notice that. And it's obvious that you haven't done your homework and haven't done any strategy that way. If you send a message and there's no incentive for a reply, then people are going to be less likely to get back to you. And incentive doesn't mean money. If you're local to the person, I would invite them out for coffee. When you invite a person out in person for coffee, the standard is that you would pay, but a lot of times the person, if they are, if you're trying to connect with somebody who's high up or manager or business person, they typically know that they have a higher salary than you do, and they'll make an effort to get there before you and buy their own coffee. So don't feel like if you invite people to coffee, you're going to end up spending all of your money trying to pay for other people. Most of the time with men, they will buy their own and they'll buy mine, even if I'm the one who invited them out. And that's not a rule. I don't expect it. I always offer, even when they say no, but just know that it improves. It will improve your outcome for a meeting in person 1,000%. I wouldn't recommend offering lunch because it gets more awkward. Happy hours and coffee is a little bit more appropriate, I think, for a first introduction to a stranger for this type of meeting. Now, if it's somebody you already met, maybe at another networking event, and it's not your first time talking to them, then, and especially if you had met at like something that was a lunch and learn or something, that might be more appropriate. But the point is to have a purpose for it and to have thought about it. And then, so as Courtney's question was, if you can't explain why you tried to connect to that person, it's again obvious that you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. So you should be able to explain to yourself, firstly, why are you contacting the person, and then also be able to say it to them. So I met you somewhere else. So-and-so recommended I contacted you. You are an alumni at the same school, and I would like to ask your opinion. It doesn't have to be a perfect match for my life, and I need you to give me this information, but just something that says why you chose them. And then another thing that happens a lot, and I get this with younger people a lot, and also people from other countries. You're not getting to the point. I've had people say, hey, I would like to ask you a question. And then I get hit with 6 questions at once. That goes back to, it's all about you. It also goes back to, what is my incentive to even spend the time reading this email? You got to get to the point. And, the first message is an introduction. This is why I'm messaging you. And can we talk more? You don't jump in and start asking people right into the meat and potatoes about, hey, I have no idea who you are. You've never met me. Can you please tell me everything about your life in this message? That isn't how it works. Again, that's not the instant gratification world that we live in. And another thing, like I talked about this other coaching person who was selling coaching services, if you visit a person's profile many times without sending them a message, they're going to see that. I think if it's within a day or two, it looks like the same, it might not look like you went back a couple of times. And there's not a lot of reasons to do this, except for that maybe you don't know what to say to the person, or you're probably actually doing it because you want to see like what their job title is or whatever. But for the other person, then they get the mind chatter seed, right? So they're the one now who's thinking, why does this person keep looking at my page? Now, to the point of the next bullet, if your profile isn't complete, then that's a huge issue. So if you've come to my page a bunch of times, especially I'm a career coach, right? So if you come to my page and I go to your page and it says you're looking for a job, I'm going to totally just get the point. I'm going to understand why you keep coming up in a viewer of my page. But if I go to your profile and it doesn't tell me anything about you, then you look stalkery again. So when it's you, it is very well can be things that you're actually doing, and having an incomplete profile is one of those things. I don't recommend sending any single person a message on LinkedIn or even an email, because the first thing I'm going to do when you send me an email, I don't know you, is go look you up on LinkedIn. So before you do any of this, as part of your strategy, you should have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile with a good picture. And then finally, the last thing is you don't follow up. So if you think that you're going to connect with people and get that instant gratification of them replying on the first try, you're greatly decreasing your chances, because all those reasons, like I just mentioned in the previous slide, if they forgot, they passed the buck to somebody else and they were waiting for them to get back. Just follow up. A week or 2 weeks is totally appropriate. Don't follow up the next day. You can follow up a week and say, hey, I sent you a message. I was just making sure you got it. That's all it has to say. And that might be enough for them to say, oh yeah, I totally forgot. I'm so sorry. And when people owe you an I'm so sorry, then you actually get more in return. So the follow-ups are great because you get a little bit of like, oh, now I owe you something. This happens. I do this all the time, and I get a lot of results from doing this. So I really recommend, and however you need to do that, in a planner, on your Google Calendar, whatever you need to do to remind yourself, because once you're doing this, you're going to have a lot of people that you need to follow up with. You'll want to have that, a means to do that in an organized way. Okay, so networking is hard and scary. And you may, if you're doing any of those things, might actually seem kind of stalkery or not be getting the results you want. So why do you still need to keep doing it? And no matter what, it's still the most effective way to get not just any job, but the job that you want. So I have this rather lengthy quote here from an article written by an WorkNet Dupage. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but basically this is Lou Adler. He's founder of the Adler Group, and it's an evangelical church thing that he has going, but his message here, it makes lots of sense. This is based on full-time person networking. So if you're freaking out going, I can't do this amount of numbers, that's totally fine. That's not, you would pare this down to your amount of time that you have to spend networking. So, or job searching, not just networking. Anyway, it says networking is how you turn 4 to 5 great contacts into 50 to 60 connections in 2 to 3 weeks. And in an article that he wrote, he says networking should represent 60% of your job hunting efforts. And I completely agree with that. And it says 20 to 30 per hours per week if you're doing full time. So if you back that down to however many hours you're spending doing job searching, recalculate for how many connections you'd want to be making. And a couple more reasons why it's so important to work through this. You used to be able to get a job from a newspaper. You used to be able to compete for jobs less. So everybody was going to the same newsletter. There were less people in the world. But the number one thing is that first bullet there is that you are going to be able to find jobs that aren't listed, or even ones that don't exist yet. Back when things were in the paper, the same thing happened. Maybe a job never made it to the newspaper, but right now it may not ever make it to LinkedIn or Indeed, one of those places. If you end up talking to a person who, you save them a ton of money if they don't have to actually go out and advertise for the job. Now, there are businesses like governments that have to. They have a protocol, that says that they have to be able to reach out to a certain amount of people, and then that's a whole different issue about interviewing people who will never have a shot at the job. But besides that, this is an important main reason why you want to keep networking. And then future support. So this isn't about now. This isn't, again, about getting your job. It's about building relationships. You have no idea when somebody you met 6 months, a year, 5 years ago could be somebody that you could use for advice, to join a presentation that you're giving. My February networking webinar, I called upon somebody that was a previous member of TBAP, and we met during networking, and she was perfect for it. So you don't know when someone's going to call upon you to actually come and maybe give a presentation or talk or do something. So again, it's about opening doors. So networking is a lifelong skill that will help you in work and life. So now let's move on to how we can get over these issues. And I can guarantee you, if you can master these 3 things in networking, you'll kill it. And your percentage, you're never going to get those people who aren't going to reply. So you'll never get 100% ever. But we want you to get upwards towards a 50% response rate. And that's pretty darn good. And if you can get between probably a 30 and 50% response rate, you're doing well. So we want you to work on your mindset and understand that you can only control what you can control. You can't control what you can't, and then be positive about everything else. You need to create a creative message strategy. And this is so that you can set yourself apart. People will see that you've spent time planning and researching, and it will pay off in additional ways. So not just making that connection, but you'll have the opportunity to do something that goes above and beyond that and creates bigger reach. And then if you come at it with connection integrity, that means you're going after the right people with the right message and the right intention. You will be spot on. All right, so let's first talk about mindset. We touched on this a little bit, where that stalkery feeling comes from, but this is a little bit deeper now. It ultimately comes from a fear of rejection. So that's worrying about the worry. Things are worse until they actually happen. And then you go, oh, I didn't have anything to worry about. Same thing with networking, right? So I send a connect. I'm afraid to send this message to somebody. What if they're too important for me? What if I'm just a little person I don't care about? What if I'm not good enough? All of those doubts, right? None of those are worse than the actual rejection. But the actual rejection in networking is that's back to the dilemma is when someone just doesn't reply. So it's really, you're self-inflicting that. The person, rarely are you going to get anybody who actually takes the time to reply, and it's a hurtful reply. So when you're the one who's putting the negative connotations on it, then you also have the ability to stop doing that. So the more you can understand these and recognize them, and understand and recognize the reason why that rejection, quote unquote, is happening, then you'll be able to move on. And like I said, just brush them off. The other thing is self-limiting beliefs. So that's the inward fear that, what if this does work out? And it's self-sabotage. So then we have the stranger danger is real thing. Yes, it is. But if you do those 3 things we just talked about, you will eliminate that from your end. And then just the crappy human thing, that's those people who won't respond no matter what. And it also means that even if you got a connection suggestion from someone. So if I said to you, Courtney, I think this person is awesome. You need to connect with Jeff. Jeff is the coolest. He's super nice. And then you go to connect with him and he doesn't reply, or he declines your invite. I may have met him at a time when things were great and he's super happy. You may have connected with him at a time when he's a completely different person. So again, that's not on you. It's not on me. I will feel bad for giving you a connection request that doesn't work out, but it's not on me either. I have to go with what I know. And so you have to just understand that and say, okay, well, thanks, Jeff. I will try again with someone else. You have to stay positive. You have to let your values guide you. If you know that you connected with integrity, tried to contact the right person, it was someone who was suggested to you or somebody who was an alumni. If you didn't do anything shady and you know that, you've done everything that says your values and integrity says this is okay, you have no reason to feel bad about it, no matter what their response is or if they don't get back to you. Know that it's part of the process. Again, understand that there's a certain percentage you will never hear from. Just go with the flow. Be excited about the right ones. There's a part of I have learned over my life that sometimes the things I thought I really, really wanted weren't the things I was meant to have. And that's a hard concept to grasp, but networking is a lot like that. So the ones who don't get back to you were never meant to be, let them go. And then again, don't let those people who don't reply to you build self-doubt in your brain. That is you doing inflicting, stop hitting yourself kind of a thing. And then know that it's forgotten by the other person. You don't have to feel embarrassed about it. If you know, like you might know that I had a person who actually got a job. This is a little bit further extreme explanation of this, but he actually got a job and then didn't make it through the probationary period, and which happens to lots of people. And then was wondering, like, how can I start networking again? Thinking, like, I call it the Carrie syndrome, like they're all going to laugh at you, but that's in your head. That's not in their head. They have so forgot it and move on. You're not going to meet somebody you try to connect with again, and they're not going to be like, oh my God, she tried to meet with me. Like, no, nobody's like that. And again, if they are, they're not worth knowing. And then just keep in mind that your dream is worth it. If you really want to, there's a job that you want a certain place, there's a something you need to learn about, it's worth going through this to make it happen. So the quote there to keep all of this in perspective is 10% of what happens to you. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. This very much applies in networking. Okay, and the next part is the creative message strategy. And that means having to think outside from the informational interview. So people are getting burned out on informational interviews. I would even just try to call them something else. And that's, even if it's just, you don't even have to call it that. Like inviting somebody to coffee and asking them some questions about their job is kind of an informational interview. But when you say, I would like to have an informational interview, that's almost parallel to asking for a job. So you have to get creative and think outside of that. Make sure that you are doing your homework and research. You looked at their LinkedIn profile, or if they have a website, know where they work. You have something of interest or connection or experience to say to them. So even if you're connecting with someone who's alumni, you're able to say, hey, we went to the same school. I'd like to ask you some questions. And I also see that we're both interested in crew. We both did crew while we're there. That's going to 10 times that person's interest in getting back to you. And when you don't say something like that doesn't get their attention, they'll be easily forgotten again. So you have to put in the time and effort to make these requests. And so there's another 10-90 rule. And that one is about the 10% of time that you take to plan will help produce 90% of the efforts in it, or reduce 90% of the efforts in achieving your goals later. So keep the 10-90 rule in both of those cases in mind. And so what do I mean about getting creative? And first off, you just got to research. You need to figure out a means of connection, a means of reaching out to people, something that you both can relate to. You have to explain why you're reaching out. And this is back to Courtney's question. If the person you're connecting with has zero obligation to get back to you. So if you haven't explained why you're reaching out and it isn't interesting, or it doesn't make sense, then that person's, their likelihood of getting back to you decreases. So you'll notice all of these getting creatives are go back to the when it's on you slide. Incentivize the invite, get creative about it. You could invite somebody to another networking event. Hey, I've never been to an NAAP event, and I see that they're having one next month at whatever. Have you ever gone to one? Would you like to meet me there? It doesn't have to be crazy. It just has to be different. And then that's how you stand out and get people's attention. And then think about, if you receive the message that you're about to send, how would you respond to it? Think about how you would respond to it if you were now a working professional. You're going to, at one point down the line in your career, you're going to be the one that's getting these types of emails from people. And what would you like them to say in there? Again, follow up, have that complete professional profile. Even within your complete and professional profile, how do you stand out there? there's a sea of entry-level people in the world, and there's a sea of people. There's just a sea of people. There's too many people in this world. So you've got to try to find a standout some way. And that's having your personality shine through, some interest. You can't really get crazy on your resume, but you can put whatever you want on your LinkedIn. Make your title catchy, something that gets people's attention. The tip everyone, this I try to keep in mind. That's kind of from, if you've ever seen the movie My Blue Heaven, Vinny says, he tips everybody. In my worst New York accent. And tipping everybody is about doing your homework and bringing something to the table. So he doesn't mean he monetarily tips everybody, or maybe he does, but you want to tip everybody in a way where you're providing value to them. So it's hard. I know people who are so good at this. They're the kind of people who remember birthdays and they remember holidays and anniversaries and they never miss it. That's hard for me. So it's something that I try to work on every day. But so if you are a person like that, work it. But if you're not, build that muscle and that will take you far. So that's meaning that, okay, we set the meeting up. And when I get there, I'm going to have somebody I think you should talk to, or I'm going to have a project idea that I think you would like. I'm going to have some tip that I could give you that would be helpful to you. And then when I talk about your LinkedIn feed and keeping it clean, so there's another thing about who you should accept as a connection. So when people do connect with you, if they might be a recruiter or just somebody you have no idea why, you have to create your own boundaries. There are people who are very, they won't accept requests from anybody if they haven't already met them, which again puts the kibosh on networking this way, because you're trying to meet ahead of actually meeting them in person. But I try to make sure that I don't include my dentist. I want to make sure that everything in my feed is consultant related or environmental related. So I follow the groups and businesses that are relevant to me. I don't follow fashion on LinkedIn. I save that for the other social medias. So that's all I mean, is that it can keep you more focused on having the right articles to learn from and to comment on and to find the right people that you might want to link it with. If your feed has only, if that makes sense, then I can explain that later if it doesn't, to follow just the things that are relevant to you. And then be active on LinkedIn. So that's another way to have people see your name, and then for you to get into conversations with people, for them to, when they do go look at your page, they can see what you're interested in and that you're actually doing things. So here's a quick example. Sarah's graduated last semester with a degree in geology, and she's very interested in getting a job in an environmental consulting firm. And when we think of what her networking options might be, you can see that if you don't have a plan, it's just too broad. Okay, what would she do? She could network with anyone, but we want to narrow it down to the people that are effective and are likely to apply or reply. So if she's looking at a local strategy and meeting people in person, then she's going to narrow the focus down to people who are local and probably ask for outside of the box informational interviews. If she's looking online, she could start with companies that she wants to work for and narrow that down to the appropriate employees there, and also maybe alumni from the same school. And when you're talking about trying to find appropriate people, I think I might talk about this a little bit later. There are things that you can look for. And then just the point is to have a strategy. Who am I going to connect with, when, where, how many people, and just have a purpose in it. When you don't have a purpose in it, that's when it becomes throwing the spaghetti at the wall. And then people have that question, why is she contacting me? Because it doesn't make any sense. And I'm speeding up here a little because I want to get to question and answers. So as I said before, you're going to let those values guide you. How do you find the right people? First thing you want to do is part of your overall LinkedIn and networking and online connecting strategy is to increase those second degree connections by connecting with people that you've already met. So the way the second degree connections work is that when you're have reached out and connected with someone, you then have second degree connection with everyone that they're connected with. So the more of those you can build, the bigger your second degree becomes. And the reason that matters is because LinkedIn does limit your ability to connect with people to second degree unless you're on your phone, and then you can do it anyway. And then there are tricks to these softwares. But that's a good strategy to have, just to kind of increase your network and to be able to reach out to more people and have more people in your search results. Follow the companies that you're interested in. So again, you'll see that in your feed, and you'll be able to see the names of the people who post for those companies. So when you want to connect with somebody at a company, you don't connect with Joe Schmo who never participates or posts on LinkedIn, but you connect with the person who's very active on LinkedIn, because they're going to be 1,000 times more likely to actually reply to you because they're familiar with the platform and they use it and they're used to using it. When you actively participate, then you can let people find you. If you've been engaged in a conversation with somebody who works at Arcadis and then a job comes up, then you're more likely to already have started that relationship and be able to contact them and say, hey, who can I talk to here that could help me with this? And the same thing with groups. If you can find just a couple of groups, I follow a ton of groups. I'm probably only active in 3. You need to find the ones that you can spend time on, because you can spend an infinite amount of time doing this, and you don't want to spend all your life doing it or all your time. But just as part of your strategy, pick a couple and pick a few to be engaged in, even if it's just one, but just make it part of your strategy that has a reason behind it. And then when you're looking for a specific person at a job, check their job title. You're probably not going to want to now. I take that back. What I was about to say, you can try to connect with the owner of the company, but your expectations have to be right. Don't expect them to get back to you. And understand that your messaging better be darn good, because that person's time is super valuable. And then when they do get back to you, you need to make sure that you aren't wasting their time and you know what you're going to say ahead of time. And then, again, looking at their profiles and looking for alumni. I promised to talk about the foreign factor for just a few minutes. And again, I wanted to do that because I have some colleagues, some friends in other countries that do follow me, and I promised to say a few words. So this is extra challenging for people who live in other countries trying to connect here in America, because that stranger danger factor, when you get a spam email, it has spelling mistakes. When you get a spam email, it comes from another country. When you get a spam email, it's spam. And so when someone who doesn't have English as a first language sends a message here, even if with the best intentions, if the spelling isn't right, your brain automatically goes to, is this right? Is this real? Is this a real person? So you have to be uber diligent about your grammar and spelling. And then don't be pushy. That's a cultural thing. I've noticed that where us here in the States connecting with each other, we're a little bit shy about it and have am I doing the right thing insecurities. Culturally, from other countries, I've had a lot of connections, a lot of messaging where, and I don't know if it's an attempt to be overly confident or just a difference, but just don't be pushy is all I'm saying. That's the kind of thing where you jump in and start asking a bunch of questions without ever introducing yourself. Let the process happen. Be mindful of time differences. People try to connect with you in the middle of the night, not understanding that, you might be in a different time of the day. And then again, just be extra clear about what you want and why you're contacting, because just the fact that the email came from another country makes it more suspicious. And I'm just thrown out there the perception of how it is. I'm not saying that you're actually being like that, but that's what the perception is, and you have to overcome it. But I want to encourage you to do it. If you want to learn about jobs here, anything else, you just still need to do your homework like everybody else, and be very diligent about why you're connecting and why you chose that person that you did. Okay, so now we'll take a little look around LinkedIn and see what's going on here and some things that you can use to not feel stalkery while you're going around here. One of the things is that you can turn on or off how people see you when you go to your page. So if anybody's ever, you see the notifications that will tell you so-and-so looked at your page. Most of the time it shows you who that person actually is, but sometimes it tells you just this gray circle and says either where they work or it's completely anonymous. This is where you change that. And that's in under settings, privacy, and then the one that says how others see your LinkedIn activity. Most of the time you want to keep that on because you don't want to accidentally message somebody that way. And then secondly, again, we're operating from an area that is good intentions. So you don't have a reason to come across as anonymous. Now, if you're checking up on a person and you want to see if they're still alive, if anything on their status has changed, you're expecting to hear back from them and you didn't, or maybe they responded and then you were waiting for that. Like this happens too. Hi, I'd like to connect. And they answer you and you reply and then nothing, they go dark. Once or twice, you can go back and check their page. That's fine, but you don't want to continually be making that circle back. So you may sometimes want to actually use this. There just might be certain times when you want to have this on. I just want you to know that it's there. But you don't want to have this on full time. Then you want to be able to check your past connection requests. Who have I responded to that hasn't responded to me? So you can go to My Network and then you click on the Manage All. That's the second arrow. And then the next screen pops up with the sent. So you go from received up to the sent. And then it will give you the list of all of the outstanding invitations that you have sent out. And so if it's somebody that you're like, okay, I don't want them to have this anymore, you can actually withdraw that request. If you withdraw it, I think you can actually try to connect with them again in 30 or 60 days or something. You can also see if you tried to send them a message and what that message said. You could check out their profile. You might go to their profile and go, oh, they haven't, made any updates. That doesn't actually look like they're active. Give yourself some reassurance about why that person didn't get back to you. Here's another thing. If you can get the person's email, it might be best to connect with them there. Email has less of a stalkery, spammy feel, especially if it's their professional one. That's right at the top of their profile, and you just click on see contact info. It's not always there, but if it is, that is sometimes a better way. And sometimes I do both. Sometimes you can connect, send a message on LinkedIn, a connection request, and just say, hey, I'm going to follow up with an email. And then just try both areas. And you're going to boost your likelihood of getting a reply. Then if you want to find a person at a specific business, so you would go to jobs or search the company, and then it's going to tell you, it's going to come up with this like search area. It's going to come up with the company. And then over on, this is the top pop-up box. I can draw here. Let me pull this up. So over here is going to show you how many connections work there and then their employees. Arcadis is huge. So you could start there and narrow down. You could start with the connections that you have. I clicked on, this is the connections over here. And you'll see that if I click on, I can either look at my first round connections, but what's important is it tells me who we share. So if I find somebody that I want to talk to, I could actually try to see if one of these shared connections actually knows that person and can introduce us. Recommendations. If you meet somebody in person or you work with someone, this is a powerful way to build your profile and to build some goodwill with people. It's not necessarily a networking tool, but if you go to right next to message, there's a little more box. And then down at the bottom, it says recommend. Then it will pull up this box and you can give a person a recommendation. And they're likely to give you one back unless it's, again, something that makes no sense. Make sure that it's not for somebody you've never met before, for sure. And then how do you find alumni? So this is where you would go to the job search. And in that, it'll show you the companies. So I went to jobs. I didn't do any specific job title search here, but if you did, it would still show you in each of the jobs listed under your search who the alumni are. And then you could, if you wanted to, look them up. Again, don't just assume, okay, great, they're alumni, I'm going to connect with them. You've got to go to their page and look at it and see, like I said, if they have other reasons for you to connect, something else to talk about. Are they active? You don't want to just you're wasting. I mean, for one thing, you're wasting your time. If you go to link with somebody who's not active on LinkedIn, you've completely just wasted the time that you spent. So we want you to be effective as the time that you're spent doing this as well. And then finally, for this area, when you look at a person's profile, the places that you can find clues to see if they are active on LinkedIn, if they're going to be a good person for you to connect with, is one, the summary. So you check that out. It's going to tell you what their job is. It's going to tell you what they're interested in. Sometimes they might say something about a fun hobby or a volunteer thing that they do. That's great. Look for mutual connections and interest. If there's nothing in their summary, that's an indication that they don't use LinkedIn very much, or they don't take it all that seriously. The number of connections, if someone has 26 connections, don't bother. That means they don't really use LinkedIn. So you might even set yourself a threshold. I'm not going to connect with anybody who has less than 300, 400, whatever makes sense to you. You want to have ways to narrow down the time you're spending doing this and not throwing spaghetti at the wall. Look at their articles and activities. If they have, if they are daily liking things, commenting on things, then you know that they're very active and they're going to be a higher chance of getting back to you. Check out the groups they're in. Are there any that you could both be interested in? Could you start a conversation there? Check out, again, their education, mostly looking for alumni stuff, but also looking for mutual interest. And then the common connections. So there's the place on the profile. I don't know if I show this next. No, there's a place on the profile that shows you who the connections that you have in common. And as you start building in the environmental world, it's a small world that will build very quickly. Like you saw on the previous slide, I had sometimes 17 up to 40 mutual connections with some of those people. You can look for those as well. And just to say that, hey, I'm reaching out to you. If you're really stretching, there's somebody at a company that you are interested in, like Arcadis has hundreds of thousands of employees or thousands of employees. If you go to a small company, a startup, they might have 10, 12, less than that. You're not going to have that necessarily common connection thing. But you might be able to, you might not, sorry. You might actually have a connection who could introduce you to somebody to there. And so looking for any of these commonalities, especially in the smaller businesses, will be very helpful to you. Okay, and then wrapping this part up, we're going to end up going over 6 o'clock because of that brief time we had trying to fix the audio. So I hope you'll all hang in there. If not, the replay will be available. So taking a look around LinkedIn still, if you want to take advantage of following the groups, hashtag, I don't know if you could follow hashtags now in LinkedIn. But that's another way to follow stuff that you're interested in. I don't do that necessarily because I already follow too many companies. Follow a couple thought leaders. You don't want to over water down your feed. So if you follow 15 thought leaders, that's all you're going to see is comments or posts from Richard Branson all day. And you may not ever see the stuff from the people who work at the businesses that would get you jobs. So keep that in mind. You can follow people that you want to meet too. So you don't necessarily, if there's a person that you want to see their post in your feed, you can just follow them. You don't have to actually connect with them. Again, keep in mind the function on your phone is different than your desktop. So if you run into limitations on your desktop, see if you can do it on your phone. And then there are times when stalking works. So, and I don't mean repeat stalking, but occasionally if there's somebody, I will look at someone's page and then they'll turn around and connect with me first before I've reached out to them. And I love when that happens. So one more example. This is Herman, and Herman has been following Arcadis for several months, waiting for a new position to become available in his area. And he just got noticed that there is an opening. So, considering that, and even for yourself, what kind of approach could Herman take to get a foot in the door? So, my first suggestion is that he sits down and thinks about a plan of attack, a strategy. All right. So, one of those strategies is to write down the different options and potential outcomes of those options. So, that means one option would be looking up the location that he wants to work at and seeing if there are connections. Another option is looking up alumni. Another option you want to get really inventive is to have a project, an interview set. So I'm going to reach out to different people at Arcadis and ask them questions. You definitely would want to ask as much or find out as much about Arcadis as possible. And then when he does actually send, so part of your strategy, his strategy should be when I do get that meeting, that you don't squander it. So a lot of times I'll ask people, okay, you have your meeting set up. What are you going to ask? What are you going to talk about? And the low-hanging fruit questions are, how many people work there? What's it like to work there? What do you do? All that stuff is on their LinkedIn. It's on the website. Don't ask people those questions. Those can kind of come up in your conversations, but you want to ask them, what's your day-to-day like? Do you love it? What do you hate about it? What happens on a good day? What happens on a bad day? What do I need to learn to do this job better? The stuff that isn't readily available. So make that part of your strategy too. All the way from, I'm trying to meet the person. What am I going to say to them when they say yes? So wrapping up with some in-person networking tips. Make sure you have your elevator speech ready. It doesn't have to be perfect, just something to practice. Don't try too hard. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Kids in the Hall. It's a TV show from the 90s. Shows my age a little bit, but I just was watching it yesterday, and there's a skit about these businessmen who are networking, and they're all trying really hard, and they're all boosting themselves up and talking about themselves, and just don't be that guy. Should look it up. And then confidence begets confidence. Muster as much of it as you can. Set yourself a small goal. So you could have a goal of talking to 1 to 3 people. If I recommend that for if networking is really scary to you and you haven't done much of it, just your goal might be just to show up if you've never been, if it's a new thing for you. And then your second one, I'm going to make myself talk to 1 person, right? Those kind of goals. Be patient. Again, it's not instant gratification. You're not going to have that job door open the next day, but you just want to be meeting people who can open doors for you and that you can help them open those doors. And then grab a cup. Make yourself comfortable. Even doesn't mean you have to get a cup full of alcohol. If you're still in college, you're not old enough, you don't drink at all anyway, that's fine. But when you end up networking professionals, they love to drink beer, they love to just hang out and chat, and I guarantee you that will just make you feel more comfortable. And you can always just hang out with a group of people and hold that drink, and you'll fit right in. It makes a huge difference than like having 2 hands free and not knowing what to do with them and not having anything to say, I promise you. So for more tips on networking in person, you can watch the previous networking webinar from February. It's on the website. So to wrap up, don't be afraid to reach out. Use the right positive mindset, creative strategy, and positive intention, and you will not fail. Be sure to follow up. That's a big part of increasing your replies. And then once you have their intention, just make sure you're asking questions that bring value to you, bring value to them, and aren't wasting their time. All right, so I'm going to open it up to questions. I see something in here now. Courtney, would you recommend LinkedIn Premium or is it not worth it? I would not recommend it. You have plenty of options and I'm glad you asked this question because it comes up, and I've had people who've complain to me that they've reached their limit on searching. But I think if you're coming at it again with no strategy, yeah, you're gonna hit the limit because you're just doing random searches. If you are using a strategy that you're finding people through groups and you're finding people through their pages, you have unlimited searching, so you won't run into that issue. The in-mail thing, nobody expects it. It's overrated. So I would not. I want everyone to make their own decisions, but I don't think that it's necessary if you're using a really good creative strategy to connect with people. All right, that's the only question I have left there. Does anybody else have any questions? This is my last webinar for this year, and next year I'm moving into interviews. So this is adding to this notion of creative connecting. I will be doing interviews to try to get YouTube videos and some up-to-date information about the different types of jobs that are available out there. But it will be a package for students, recent grads, people to use as the perfect excuse to connect with any working professional. So you'll have sort of directions and this set of materials that will help you to have an excuse to connect with people and say, hey, I'm an affiliate for the Environmental Career Coach, and we're trying to build this list of experience to put out there for people to reference online. And I would like to ask you to do an interview. And that would give you that creative incentive to connect with people. So that's what's coming up in 2019. And if you want to watch any of the past webinars, they're on the website. And I hope that anyone who's not connected with me will connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you still have questions or you think about something later, feel free to email me and reach out. And if there are no more questions popping up, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar and hope you all have a wonderful evening.